read these manuals and do the best you can. Figure it out. I was like, you're kidding me, right? They were like, nope. I said, I can't read all these, but I did. You just start reading, right? You just do it. You just do it. So.
Like I told you, I had this sergeant that everybody knew him in the nuclear arena. And so the Defense Nuclear Agency came over to, they wanted comments on their joint regulation, Army, Navy, Air Force, on their joint regulation. So they said, they had a conference there at my higher headquarters, and they said, send Sergeant Barentine and Aldrich over here to talk to these guys from the Defense Nuclear Agency. I said, what the hell do they want me for? I don't know anything about this. And that's when I got there, and I told my higher level intelligence guy, I said, hey, I don't know why you called me over here. I said, I'm going to just embarrass myself. I said, I'm learning, he said, you're associated with Sergeant Barentine. That's why they called you over. They've heard your name and his name together, and they figure you must know something. Now get in there and talk to him.
Wow. Been there, done that. Janet, tell him how you met Bob
we went through the regulation. We went through this. This is a Joint Chiefs of Staff publication, and we started at the very beginning, and we went through each page. Now there's several officers there that were very cognizant of nuclear weapons, and we went through one page at a time, and we said, "Has anybody got any comment on this page?" And then if anybody did, we discussed it. If not, we went to the next page. So it was real thorough. And of course, Sergeant Barentine, being in those positions for almost 20 years, he said, "Yes. Why do you do this? Why is this in here? It's ambiguous, and people interpret it in different ways." And here's these guys from the Defense Nuclear Agency. They're writing everything he says.
Oh, gosh. Hard to look good to another country when you're being honest. Yep. Just ambiguous. Well, you know how those manuals get written, so we just do the best we can with what orders we're given and do the best we can to put them together. And maybe sometimes they're duplicate, numbers or
there's all kinds of, you're constantly changing things because procedures change, but also to make them more understandable or clearer. You want to change the manual. I mean,
well, go ahead.
For years, they would send out to the field. Now, if you're in the Army, you're on the ground unless you're, flying a helicopter or a light plane. But you're on the ground. So if you look up in the sky, you don't see a fighter plane or anything from the top. You see it from the bottom. But every Army publication where you're supposed to identify aircraft, they show you the top view. And finally they had a manual come out, and you're supposed to give it to every soldier, common task manual. And it had the views from the top. And I wrote in and suggested put in a publication suggestion change and said, how many soldiers are going to be above a flying aircraft? And I got a little note back from the from the Common Task guys, and they said, "We've had about 1,000 of the same comments. Thank you." So then they put side views and bottom views of aircraft in.
Well, that was good. Hey, Janet, can you help me out here, please? You met Bob Dean, and tell Jan a little bit. I know he may have heard him, but I want to see between the two of y'all how you can pull him in, because what it is, Jan, is I want to compile more work in the future where you left off, and we'll do this orally and archive it, but they can be put into transcripts, and we can make manuals out of them. But Janet had sort of an idea that got me involved with her back in 2012 after she met at one of Alejandro's. It wasn't his at the time. It was it Bill Brown's before they had the anyway. Bob Dean and what's the other guy had the first Tucson UFO.
There was some other group that had it before Alejandro bought it, but Alejandro was involved with the other group. So somewhere it shifts leadership or ownership to Alejandro robots and his wife, but I don't remember her name.
Bob Dean had the Tucson one with the other guy. What's his name? He's dead too, but I can't. I know his name, but right now I can't remember everybody. You know how things slip your mind like they did Jan. Jan? What's the other guy? But it's from Tucson. What's the guy's name? Jan. They had their first UFO event. It was Bob Dean,
Bob Brown, and
what's that sound? Okay, go ahead, Janet.
Maybe.
No, that was
Bob Brown.
Okay, it was just
Bob
feedback.
Brown,
Yeah.
Bob Dean and Bob Brown. They started out in the Aquarius out there in Laughlin, and then they moved to. I started going when they moved to what was it called? Fountain Hills in Scottsdale, and I don't know what year it was. I was going to each and every one of them. I finally missed the first one this year. I've been going for years and years and years. I missed this year. But anyway, so Bob was no longer able to. Bob was no longer able to do conferences because he was getting too old, and they had him presenting once a year, and then they stopped having him present. So not sure what all happened, but Bob, I guess, was getting weak. He had almost died. Spent 3 weeks in a coma. He bounced back from that and came back to the conferences. And he used to hold court. I call it holding court. So Bob would be outside smoking his cigars. So you had to take a deep breath, and if you wanted to talk to Bob, go in and get through the smoke, you know. But he just loved it. People loved Bob, and they come over, and because he was very wise. He was one of the original whistleblowers. He was high up in the military. I think his son was still in the military. So he was a wonderful resource of information. He was full of stories. And he was just such a beautiful soul, lovely being. And I actually met him, before that, I met him at the San Francisco Bay UFO conferences. So I've been going to these conferences since I met Dr. Lesson in 97. I moved in with him in 97. So we started by going to Zechariah Sitchin's classes, the Prophets Conference, and then they moved to Spain, and then we started just going to other UFO conferences to fill the gap. So Bob wanted to come back. So in 2011, 2012, we had a big meeting, and we were going to do Stargaze Cosmos, and so he was coming back, but that it never did happen. So God bless Bob. I think he wanted to do one more, but it didn't happen. So then he was never able to come back to a conference after. I think he was there like 2013, 2014. Then his wife was taking care of him, and he was too sick to come and hold court. So that's the end of Bob. And I did meet J. Allen Hynek at the early Star Trek conferences in let's see, what year was that? 1973, 74, or something like that, and 75. I know I turned 21 at the Star Trek conference in New York City when they announced that the movie was coming back. And then the movie took a couple more years to finally come out. But the Star Trek had been canceled. So Hynek, Roddenberry, Robert Heinlein, or Robert H. Heinlein, and Isaac Asimov were always doing these wonderful panels. And they were talking about how, Star Trek was outlining the future. And people were saying, wow, we're going to have things like these teleportation devices and everything. So I think from your story that you've encountered a lot of that stuff in your life. But anyway, passing the stick back to you, the talking stick back to you.
Well, let's see, Jan. Now we're talking going back to APRO, so you've got a lot of history, and let's document back in the beginning for Janet as well. Janet, for you and me with Bob Dean, because she put a real cute picture of her and me and Ken for historical purposes to help do all the Allied Command, I guess, civilian stuff, because I didn't realize that SHAPE was using ACO just like we do acronym for other things, the Supreme Allied Command NATO, and they had SECURE, which is where Bob worked in Europe, right? And at the European headquarters for SHAPE, okay, and the international schools. Are you familiar with SHAPE? Because I guess we could put that because Bob Dean worked there, and me and Janet has Allied Command, and what is it, Alien Contact Org. But I want to pull all this together where it makes sense before I die, and Jan has that same feeling too. He wants to get a lot of this stuff out, Janet, and we need to put it on a timeline, right? Some type of timeline back to. He's got Project 1947, Janet, already built. So if we start, then we can do APRO and the J. Allen Hynek's group, which Jan just went over to Chicago with Barry Greenwood and did a bunch of work. And we've had him on. Janet missed that show, but let's see if we can pull this together on a timeline. Jan, where do you want to start? You said you wanted to get into this tonight. So you want to go back to Majestic 12 because people love that. I had one of those handbooks. Do you know anything about the handbook that Clifford Stone, I don't know if he talked about, but I know Linda Moulton Howe talked about it. I don't know where you want to start, Jan. But
yeah. Well, what I'd like to talk about, and it might be seem a little bit in the weeds, but I kind of want to explain how the whole UFO project, Air Force project, got started and the history.
All right, can you go back to Majestic 12 and Helen Cotter and I don't know.
No, Majestic 12 is. I am sorry. I know this is going to bust your bubble, and you're going to be really angry. But Majestic 12 is a hoax.
Not according to the CIA papers I studied.
No. Bill Moore had Bob Pratt write a fictional work. I forget what the title of it was, but it's something about Aquarius. Fictional work, Aquarius. Now,
I know about Bill Moore's story. So, are you saying that Bill Moore made a prank? I'm talking about reading files. Now you're like
well, I don't know where you're going to find any files from the CIA talking about MJ-12 because there are none. There are phony documents that talk about MJ-12, which were made up